Hi everyone, and welcome to the Knit California channel. My name is Leslie. I'm Knit California here on YouTube and also over on Instagram and TikTok. And today is the third and last video in our Yarn Stash spring cleaning series, and we're talking about how to intentionally buy yarn and build up your yarn collection. In the first two videos in this series, we talked through how to de-stash yarn and how to organize your yarn stash. I actually organized my whole stash back here, and so it was a vlog style video going through all of that, as well as me giving you tips on how to organize and just tips in general. And in today's video, we're kind of going to go through the natural conclusion of what I feel like to this process. You know, we have intentionally gotten yarn out of our stash and organized our stash so that it is inspiring and our own personal yarn shop. And for some people, the natural next step might be to say, okay, well now I'm not going to buy any more yarn ever until I work through my entire stash, and it's going to be really great. And for some other people, that's just not realistic. We can try to put ourselves on yarn bans, but there always comes a time where a special yarn collection or a yarn colorway comes out and we know we just want to buy it. And so I really want to talk through like what that looks like to be intentional with those purchases. For me especially, I know there can be a lot of hype on Instagram, on YouTube about new yarn collections, new colorways, new patterns. I know we're always talking through our seasonal inspiration ideas and, you know, top 7 knit cardigan patterns that you should make. All of those types of videos that I have personally made myself and that I consume a lot of as well really is all out there to get us to buy new yarn and buy new patterns. It can be really easy to give into that hype and to make a lot of purchases. I have been there, I have been on that side of it, and I have also been on the other side of it, like I said, making these videos and now working with yarn dyers to help like market and brand their collections to make those sales. And so I have that perspective from both sides, and I know how easy it can be to make those impulse purchases from, you know, one-of-a-kind collections. A lot of times, you know, yarn collections come around once and we don't know if they'll be around again, so we feel like we need to buy the first time it comes out. And I really want to potentially help change that mindset a little bit and remind you that there's always going to be beautiful yarn out there. Literally always. The, you know, indie dyeing community is always growing. There are always new indie dyers popping up, making their debut, and dyeing up beautiful yarn for all of us. And so I do think it's important to remember that there will always be beautiful yarn available. Sometimes those one-of-a-kind collections, they do come back. Many dyers have favorites or their greatest hits collection at the end or at the beginning of the calendar year where they bring back the most popular colorways. And so a lot of times there is that chance to get things at that time if you didn't buy it the first time. Another thing that I think is really important when we talk about intentionally buying yarn is to know how much yarn to buy for specific projects that we personally like to make. I get the question a lot of, do you buy yarn first without a pattern in mind? Do you have a pattern first and then you buy the yarn to go along with it? And for me, it's honestly both, sometimes neither. But I think it's really important to have an idea of how much yarn you can buy for specific projects. And this is something that I really want to walk through with you today. So let's say you see a beautiful yarn, a beautiful colorway from your favorite indie dyer, and you know you want to buy it, but you don't have a specific project in mind. You know it'll fit beautifully in your personal yarn collection. It will be there to inspire you for future projects that you want to make. But at this point, when it comes time to purchase the yarn, you don't really know what you want to make with it. Maybe you have an idea. Maybe you think, oh, I think this will be a really great colorway for a hat, or a really great colorway for a cardigan. But how many skeins and what weight of yarn should I be purchasing in order to have that sweater quantity or that hat quantity in my stash and be able to use it for any pattern that I like in the future? Here's where that intentionality guide can really come in. And what I have done is I've put together a little thought template, maybe is what we can call it, to help you go through the exercise to figure out for different types of projects that you like to make, how many skeins of yarn do you typically use for those projects. And you can use this guide to help you when you're trying to purchase yarn intentionally. So let me show you an example of what this template looks like. I'm going to have this available as a free download. You can download it to use in like a digital journal you may have, or you can print it out and stick it in your, physical knitting journal, or just download it to, handwrite it out somewhere. Maybe you want to keep a copy of this in the Notes app on your phone. Do whatever you want with it. It's a free download. I hope it helps you in the future. But let's walk through this. So I created this, so I've got it pulled up here on my phone, and I've created this intentional yarn buying guide for you to use to track your yarn buying habits and to influence your future purchases. So the thought questions before you really get started filling this out are, if you've knit some of these items before, and by items we're really talking categories here, so socks, hats, sweaters, cardigans, tees, scarves, shawls, cowls, bags, whatever you like to knit the most of, these are the types of categories that you're going to want to write down and keep track of in this little intentionally yarn buying guide, okay? So if you've knit these items before, how many skeins did you use? And what is your preferred yarn weight? And how many skeins do you need per weight for these items? Now let's just say we're talking about sweaters here. For me personally, I like to knit a lot of my sweaters in DK weight. I haven't really gotten into fingering weight yet. I have knit a couple in worsted weight, but the yarn quantities can be a little bit different depending on what weight of yarn I use. I have knit sweaters in like a fingering plus a mohair, and I've used 4 of each, so that's a different quantity. I have knit sweaters in DK weight. Sometimes I need 5 skeins, sometimes I need 6 skeins. For worsted weight sweaters, I sometimes need 5 skeins, sometimes I need 6 skeins. So what I would do is I would write down all of those different quantities on this spreadsheet, just so that I know, like let's say I'm looking at a yarn and I'm thinking, I think that might be really great for a fingering plus a mohair sweater. I can come back to my guide and I can be like, oh, sometimes I typically need 4 skeins of fingering and 4 skeins of mohair to make a sweater like that. So that's how I know how many skeins I'm going to purchase. You can kind of look at it the other way as well. Maybe your budget at the time is only allowing you to purchase 1 skein of this beautiful yarn that you know you want to include in your yarn stash. You can look at your guide and you can say, okay, what types of things can I knit that I know I will love to knit with 1 skein of yarn? And maybe you'll look at it and you'll say, okay, 1 skein of fingering weight I know I can knit a pair of socks. I know I can knit some of my favorite hat patterns. I know I can knit a cowl or a scarf. Yes, I think this will fit in perfectly in my yarn stash, and I can use it for any of these types of projects. This is how I went about figuring out how to purchase sweater quantities, really, for example, without having a specific sweater in mind. I went through, about a year or so ago, a lot of the sweaters that I had knit, and I said, okay, how many skeins did I actually use to knit these sweaters? And I figured out for, my DK weight sweaters, I was really about 5 or 6 skeins. And so now when I go to purchase a sweater quantity, if I don't have a specific pattern in mind, that's how many skeins I know I typically need to buy for myself. Another way that you can go about figuring this out is if you have, maybe you have favorited some patterns on Ravelry, or maybe you have saved some patterns on Instagram. You can kind of go through your favorites and do some of the math to figure out what the yardage is or the grams that you would need for those patterns, and then compare them all, and you will likely find patterns, not like knitting patterns, but patterns in the sense that like things will start to line up for, 2 or 3 different knitting patterns. You may find a pattern in that you'll need, 4 skeins to knit each of those sweaters. Even though the yardages are slightly different, it really comes out to about the same number of skeins, if that makes sense. By doing the work ahead of time and keeping track of the projects, the types of projects that you like to make, and the number of skeins or the yardage in the yarn that you would need to complete that project, this will really help you, like I said, intentionally make more yarn purchases in the future so that you know you're buying yarn that you're actually going to use. There's nothing worse than buying 3 skeins of fingering weight yarn and literally having no idea what to make with 3 skeins of fingering yarn. Trust me, I have destashed so many 3 skein quantities from my stash because I just went on a spree of purchasing 3 skein quantities where that's not enough for me to knit a sweater. And I guess I could use 2 skeins to knit a hat and then have 1 left over, but I don't know, that's not where I really want to be. So at least for me, I know I need to stop buying 3 skein quantities in fingering weight yarn. And if I actually want a sweater quantity, I'm going to buy 5 to 6 skeins. And if I actually want this to be like a hat or a tank top or something, I will buy 2 skeins instead. So there we go. I hope this makes sense to you. I hope you can utilize this to help you out in buying yarn intentionally. I feel like I have said that phrase, buying yarn intentionally, like 800 times in this 15-minute video. So let's not make this a drinking game, okay? But yes, I hope this will be helpful to you. The one last thing that I want to mention, I did mention this in the first video in this series, the destashed video, but as we're talking about our yarn stashes, our yarn collections, and just being more intentional in general, I wanted to bring up this book again. It's called A Stash of One's Own by Clara Parks. I've read a little bit of this at this point, but I have not gotten through the whole thing yet. My plan is to read through this and do a review later this month or at the beginning of next month to kind of wrap up as like a bonus video to this spring cleaning series. But if you're interested in, again, being more intentional with your own yarn stash, I would recommend reading through something like this, or, just, watching other yarn stash organization videos and getting understanding an idea of how other people are viewing their own yarn stashes. And that's really it. This was a quick wrap up to the Spring Cleaning Your Yarn Stash series, and I hope you enjoyed. If you have any other tips for being intentional with your yarn stash or intentionally purchasing yarn, please leave them in the comments down below so other people can see them as well. If you're not subscribed already, I would love for you to hit that subscribe button. Go follow me over on Instagram if you'd love to see more content from me on a daily basis. I'm always posting in my stories. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!